Okay, let me just record. Okay, Frank.
Okay.
On to you.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and those of you who are joining this evening's webinar. My name is Frank Kowaleski, and I am a volunteer with our Community Salutes Connect. And we are pleased to be able to host a webinar tonight titled College Options in the Military. And it's being presented by University of Maryland Global Campus, who is a key sponsor for our Community Salutes and our Community Salutes Connect. Joining this evening from University of Maryland Global Campus is Kelly Wilmoth and Bethany Taylor, and they will be the subject matter experts, and they will be presenting the content to us this evening. Again, myself, Frank Kowaleski, and also this evening we have Rick Shuffling, and Rick is the person who's coordinating on behalf of our Community Salutes Connect the webinar, the technological and the navigation this evening. So I want to thank all, both Kelly and Bethany for the content, the presentation, and Rick for his support. This evening, I'm going to just run through the agenda. We're going to cover a couple of other points in a moment. I should wrap up within, just a few more minutes here. And then roughly about 15 of 20 minutes of content presented by our subject matter experts, as I just noted. Then we'll open it up for Q&A based on our previous experience with the first two webinars that we've conducted. This will be, 10 to 15 minutes. If it goes longer, we'll be happy to accommodate. And then we'll conclude. A few key points this evening will be, we're going to handle the questions after the content is presented. Questions can be sent to using the chat function in the Zoom, or just via using your audio at the conclusion of the content presentation. Questions via chat will go to Rick. He'll read those questions back to us. And obviously we're doing our audio via computer, or some of the folks out there have also dialed in telephonically. And then lastly, we will be sending evaluations to all of our participants this evening. And they'll be sent in a few days, and included in that evaluation will be any suggestions that you all may have for future webinar topics that you would find helpful. By way of background for myself, I volunteer with Community Salutes, and I got involved when my son enlisted in the Air Force right out of high school, which is, right, the Community Salutes mission. And he spent 6 years serving in the Air Force in enlisted ranks. And so that's how I became involved, and I've been a volunteer for a few years now. So, if there are any questions you have of me and Community Salutes, we can also accommodate those at the end. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Bethany Taylor. The bios were included in the invitation. So Bethany, you can feel free to take over the content.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frank. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We'll jump right into our presentation. You should see the slides on your screen now. I want to again welcome you to our College Options in the Military discussion. Again, my name is Bethany Taylor. I am the Assistant Director of External Partnerships with Stateside Military Operations at the University of Maryland Global Campus. Ms. Kelly Wilmoth, Vice President of Stateside Military Operations at UMGC, is also here with us this evening. She's going to go ahead and take a few minutes. We'll move to the next slide as I turn it over to Kelly. She's going to give you a little bit of background information about our university and our longstanding relationship with the military.
Great.
Next
Thank
slide.
you so much, Bethany. I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. This is Kelly Wilmoth. As Bethany said, I'm a Vice President with the University of Maryland Global Campus in our Stateside Military Operations Division. And in that role, I oversee all of our operations across the United States, where we have staff serving at education centers on military installations. One of the things I wanted to talk about is just very briefly is our history with the military. UMGC became involved offering educational services to the military over in Europe in 1947. At that time, the Department of Defense had surveyed American universities and colleges to see if anybody would be willing to go overseas to provide academic college level instruction to all of the soldiers who were serving overseas at the end of World War II. At the time, the University of Maryland Global Campus was part of the University of Maryland College Park. For those college sports fans on the webinar, you'll recognize College Park as the Terps. So we were part of the College Park campus up until about 1973, when we became our own separate university. So we've been in Europe for 70 years, serving military service members, veterans and their family members. We've been in Asia, throughout Asia since about the 1950s. Some of you might recognize us as the University of Maryland University College. That was our name for literally 70 years. And we just recently changed our name about 6 months ago to the University of Maryland Global Campus. And we did that because truly we are global. We are located around the world. We're in more than 150 locations in 25 countries and territories with face-to-face on-site people helping our service members and their families figure out their educational goals and get them to those goals. And we're also completely online. Bethany and I are thrilled to be a part of this evening, and I hope that our presentation will help each of you identify some tools and resources and everything that you need to do to continue a college education while you're in the military and to answer many of those questions. And again, thank you for taking the time to attend. And with that, I will give it back to Bethany.
Great, thanks, Kelly. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll quickly go over our agenda for this evening. Thankfully, today's military branches know the value of education and as a result have taken some steps to assist you with obtaining your educational goals and to assist with paying for a post-secondary education. From big universities to small colleges, you have plenty of options, each with something unique to offer. Here are some of the key items we're going to discuss during tonight's session. Why should you begin working towards your degree while on active duty? What are some things that you should consider? We will discuss some of the different enrollment options you'll find, as well as some of the pros and cons to each of them. We're going to briefly discuss some options on how you can pay for your education while actively serving in the military and how to get started. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and jump right in. Right. The first question we tend to get is, should you begin working towards your degree while you're on active duty? The short answer is yes. The reason being, because it's a smart idea. Not only will you be taking advantage of the benefits you receive from joining the military, but you can begin working towards a successful future after the military as well. The military provides tuition assistance each year to its service members. By taking classes, you're using this benefit that's provided every single year to you. For some, going to school while in the military is the road that they have to take for possible promotion or perhaps to become an officer. Many take classes as a way to prepare for life after the military as well. No matter what your motivation, you have this yearly benefit available to you though, and it's a smart decision to start working towards your educational goals if you can. Next slide. What are some of the things that you should consider? Military students especially need to balance the cost and logistics of going to school with what they want to accomplish with their degree as well. Some of the first things to think about are tuition costs, of course, and also the many different programs that are available to you today. While many schools accept tuition assistance for service members, certain institutions can be more affordable, like in-state or public universities. Private schools can sometimes be a little bit more costly. To reduce the amount of debt you graduate with, research each school's tuition and financial aid offerings carefully. Many schools have numerous scholarship opportunities for the military, many of which you will probably hear go unused each year. When considering different programs, ask yourself, why are you going to college? What do you hope to do after the military with it? It sounds like a simple enough question, but the answer isn't always so. If you have a specific area of focus you want to pursue, begin to narrow down your choices to schools with those programs. Think about the portability of the program. Life in the military is a little different. Will it easily move with you throughout your time in the military and afterwards if needed? What about course availability? Look for things such as rotating start dates each term, which will give you some flexibility. Maybe evening or weekend courses. Consider each of these items with your work schedule, and it will assist you in determining your ability to successfully complete each class. When taking classes as a military student, it's also important to know whether your possible program and school is a participant in the Federal Tuition Assistance Program. As you narrow down your choices, you can easily research this by searching your institution at the Department of Defense's Voluntary Education Memorandum of Understanding site. We're not going to click on this now, but it's my understanding all of these slides will be available to you afterwards, and you'll be able to go through all of the links at your convenience and check out the resources included. Okay, next slide. The next item we're going to talk about is accreditation. This is one of the key factors you should consider when researching an educational program, whether it's accredited and which type. If a school is accredited, it means that an officially licensed organization has vetted this school. It's reviewed its curriculum to ensure it's met basic academic standards for higher education. A college or university's accreditation is maintained only by continuing to meet this established set criteria. There's several reasons why this is important. Besides the assurance of quality and adherence to these academic standards, accreditation also determines a school's eligibility to participate in things like federal and state financial aid programs or tuition assistance. Proper accreditation is integral for the acceptance and transfer of college credits as well. It's also a prerequisite later on for many graduate programs that you may one day become interested in. In addition, it's good to note some degrees that may be obtained from a school without proper accreditation may not be as accepted for professions that require any further licensing later down the road, such as anything with accounting, architecture, engineering, law, or medicine. The most recognized and accepted type of accreditation in the United States is regional accreditation. Before I move on, when researching this topic, you will find most schools will readily provide this information to you on their website. Usually you can find it on the About Us pages or under admissions. If you do ever have any trouble finding it, just be sure, contact the school, send a quick email. Usually the admissions department will be able to point you in the right direction, and just ensure that you have checked into their accreditation. Okay, next screen. Now we're going to discuss some enrollment options available to you. Military members have more post-secondary education options available to them than ever before. When looking at your program, I mentioned considering course availability. With this comes some different course formats as well. You may find that you have the option of on-base in-seat options. There's online, which I know most are familiar with, or there's hybrid options that are available as well. This is a combination of both, some time in a classroom setting and then a large portion also online for the same course. Each type does have its own pros and cons, which must be considered carefully with your schedule. The choice made can be in part driven by your stationing location, whether or not the on-site classes are available, time availability, your desired degree major, or even subject matter. We're going to just briefly discuss some of the pros and cons for each format that you may find. Again, one of the things I mentioned, first, on-base in-seat classes. Kelly had briefly mentioned it earlier. Currently, there are hundreds of schools that offer the option of in-seat classes all over the military bases in the United States. In addition to being able to pursue a full degree with this format, keep in mind it also provides students with the opportunity to take an in-seat class when needed. With some different transferability options and that accreditation I just spoke with about, you may find a subject area you feel more comfortable taking in person rather than online. This is a huge benefit for these on-base classes. Some additional pros for the on-base option, flexible programs that allow whenever deployments may arise, less commuting time, and there's smaller class sizes than in a traditional college setting. It's also important to note, you may not be as familiar, but as Kelly again mentioned earlier, there are 5 colleges and universities that also offer classes on the military installations overseas, Europe, Asia, downrange and deployed areas. Again, even if you aren't interested in changing your degree program or your school, many students are still able to take classes at these locations and transfer them back to their home institution. Some cons, of course, with looking at in-seat classes, there are fewer degree plans to choose from if you're interested in obtaining your entire degree in this format while actively in the military. Scheduled classes do sometimes mean less flexibility than when an online option is available. And there is a limited ability, obviously, to move the program to another location with you. In comparison, you do have the online option. This tends to allow for some flexibility in program options and, of course, more portability. There's less commuting time, more variety of programs that are available to you that are available entirely online. Some cons to consider, you may feel you have limited interaction with your instructor and other students than in a normal classroom setting. It does require really good time management skills, and there are necessary technology requirements you will need to access your classes. So those are just some things to keep in mind before you enroll in a course. Okay, next slide, please. Testing programs. This is something I have found throughout the years that not as many people are or know as much about. The military does also offer service members the option to earn college credit for skills you've acquired during military training and operations. This is established through multiple testing programs. The College Level Equivalency Program Exam, also known as CLEP, and the Defense Activity for Non-Traditional Education Support, under the Dante's program, are just 2 of them available to all active duty, Guard, and Reserve personnel at a discounted rate. These exams can save you money, decrease the time it takes you to earn your degree, and give you the college credit before even stepping into a classroom. There are approximately 33 CLEP exams that fall into 5 categories: composition and literature, world languages, history and social sciences, science and mathematics, and business. For every one of these exams that you pass, you receive 3 hours of college credit. Normally, your education center has study guides for each of the exams that you are able to sign out and use prior to taking your exam. The other set, Dante's Subject Standardized Tests. These are also a series of examinations in various college subjects. They're very similar to CLEP exams in the sense that passing a DSST also earns you college credit. Depending on the institution that you choose, there are more of them under the DSSTs that will also provide you upper level credit rather than just lower level. To further research these options later on, again, I've provided a link to both on an additional resources slide that you'll find at the end of this presentation. Okay, next slide, great. Okay, so we've discussed some of your options available now, and inevitably the next big question is, how do you pay for all of it? With the military's, again, dedication to education and focus on it, active duty members have several different types of financial aid available to them. The most common are tuition assistance, the GI Bill, and scholarships and grants. Next slide. I know this was briefly discussed in another prior webinar. For those who may be joining for the first time, I'm just going to touch basis on it. Tuition assistance. Each branch offers its members TA so they can work on their post-secondary education while serving without having to pay for all of it themselves. It's available to eligible members serving on active duty in all 5 branches of the armed forces, so Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Coast Guard. It's a good option because, as I mentioned before, using TA so it's a good option because the money used to pay for tuition does not come out of your individual GI Bill right away, but rather it's paid for with a benefit that may be provided to you each year. Under the TA program, the student's military branch falling under the DoD generally pays 100% of the tuition up to the maximum amount, which varies by branch, along with most fees. This is paid directly to the school. Because the Coast Guard falls under the Department of Homeland Security and not the DoD, their payment guidelines are a bit different, so just keep that in mind. They can only pay up to 75% of tuition, and they only include lab fees. So how does it work? Applying for TA, again, also varies, of course, between branches. However, in each branch, it does start with an application of some sort. All branches but the Coast Guard do use some type of an online application process. At the bottom of this screen, you can see I have included the links for you. This will help you get started in researching your options when you're ready. Okay, next slide, please. Some other payment options available to you. First, the GI Bill. I'm sure all of you are pretty familiar with that. The term GI Bill refers to any Department of Veterans Affairs education benefit that's earned by members of active duty, selected reserve, and National Guard armed forces. The benefit is designed to help service members and eligible veterans cover the costs associated with getting an education or training. There's several different programs available. Each is administered a little bit differently depending on a person's eligibility and duty status, though. For a description of each GI Bill program, including eligibility requirements and payment amounts, you can research more at www.va.gov. The last 2 options I'm going to mention tonight are scholarships and financial aid. Even though tuition assistance is available and it's a great resource to you, and the GI Bill benefits available today are the most generous that have ever been offered, sometimes they're still not enough. Especially if you find yourself paying out-of-state tuition or if you choose to attend a private school. The good news is, again, there's many different scholarships and grants available to military members. Be sure to ask your institution what funding options are available to help you pay for your college degree. Generally, you will find a number of additional scholarship opportunities available. Many don't know that they may also still be eligible for financial aid grants. Again, be sure to ask about all of your funding options when talking with your school representative to include federal financial aid. Okay, next slide. Okay, as we begin to come to the conclusion of our presentation, the last thing I'm going to briefly discuss is how to get started. If you would like to see what your options are, I can't stress this point enough. Start with your installations education center. Become familiar with them. Go and see what they have available to offer. They have experienced staff members trained to understand the unique challenges of being in the military and trying to obtain an education simultaneously. They are a huge resource to you and they want to help. Many installations have school representatives there as well at the Education Center. All of them can discuss what schools are available with you, what classes you can take. They will go over tuition assistance regulations for you based on your branch, and then what you need to do to get started with that school. Make sure you develop a good plan and stay organized throughout this process of going to school while you're serving. And the biggest thing, I think, is take it slow at first. Start with one class. Don't jump all in. Choose something you're interested in and try one of the course formats you feel fits best with your schedule at that time. Over time, you'll find what works best for you. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned, I have included a list of additional resources to help you begin your research. This slide deck will be provided sometime after the conclusion of this presentation, so you don't need to copy them all again. But there are some tools that are available to help you learn as much as you can before deciding on the best option for you. Take some time and go through them and sit down with your education counselor and discuss your options. With that said, this now concludes our presentation. I thank you for taking some time to learn about your college options in the military. I know that was a lot of information. We will be here for a little bit, as Frank mentioned. We welcome any questions you may have at this time.
Bethany, I have a couple of questions. Frank, do you have anything on your end to start?
Well, why don't you, let's just start with the questions, Rick. And
Sure.
I'll just make one comment. Having had a son who served for 6 years, and this is a broad comment. He, in the Air Force, much of their training sometimes revolves and works through the Community College of the Air Force, which is a regionally accredited institution as well. That they're earning credits through that. So for those who may have Air Force really either relatives in the Air Force or and such, make sure you keep that in mind when it comes to any transferring credits maybe at a future time to a different institution. And this is a general comment. My son was, not the most motivated high school student, but one thing that the military really does expect, and they're not whether you're enlisted or you're a parent out there, you're really running to education. Education is a big part of our military today, and so you won't be running away from education. You'll be running to education. So,
absolutely,
Rick,
right.
Put the questions out there.
Sure. If anyone is wanting to ask questions at the control panel, either at the top or the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat icon. Anyone that types in questions will come directly to me. No one else will see them, and I'll read them off for you. Bethany, I do have a question here asking, what happens if I need to transfer locations?
Kelly, do you want to jump in or do you want me to take this?
Sure, I can jump in. So most educational institutions that are part of the Department of Defense Voluntary Education Program are going to accept transfer credit from any institution that you have attended, provided that you get a grade of C or higher. That's kind of the general rule. However, every institution has the right to decide what they accept and what they don't accept. So the transfer credit rules are governed by the American Council on Education, and all of the schools that participate in the Department of Defense education program adhere to ACE, the American Council on Education, rules and regulations policy. So there's a very strong chance that if you have to switch schools, the credit that you accumulated at the school that you started at is most likely going to transfer, but you do need to confirm that with any school that you want to transfer to. Now, one of the pros, as Bethany was talking about with online programs, is a lot of schools have 100% online degree programs. So when you transfer from duty station to duty station, if you're pursuing your education in an online format, you can easily continue to do that. Many schools that are located on the military installations with on-site instruction, they are on multiple military installations, and they also have online programs. So the ability to remain with the same university or community college as you PCS or transfer duty stations around the world, the ability to stay with the same college is easier today than it has ever been. But really taking advantage of the transfer credit opportunities that all of the schools provide is going to be your best bet. But please don't assume that a class that you take at one institution will automatically transfer to another institution. That's where you really need to make sure that you're talking with academic advisors to ensure that what you're doing is going to transfer.
Okay, I have the next question. Let me see here. Does taking classes while enlisted impact my education benefits after leaving?
Okay, so this is Kelly. I will take that as well. So the two funding sources for service members on active duty include the Tuition Assistance Program, which is funded through the Department of Defense and is completely separate from the GI Bill benefits. So the GI Bill benefits that you will earn while you're on active duty is administered by the Veterans Administration. If you tap into your VA or your GI Bill benefits while on active duty, there will be an impact on the benefit that remains available to you when you leave the service. So you need to be very considerate and cautious of using your GI Bill benefits while you're on active duty. And there are counselors on all of the education centers that can help you navigate through the process. But the Tuition Assistance Program that Bethany described in our presentation is completely separate from the GI Bill program and will not have any impact on the availability or amount of the GI Bill funding that will be available to you when you leave the military service.
Just to piggyback on what Kelly just said too, going back to what I was saying, I think that's why it's such a smart decision to use that tuition assistance and start those classes, even if you can only take one at a time. That is available to you every year, and you don't have to tap into your GI Bill necessarily. You can keep that and use the benefit that's available to you.
And thank you, Bethany. And let me just segue a little bit more into that. If you use the Tuition Assistance Program, the amount of money that is given to you by each branch of the military, it varies by branch. So I'm just going to use Army as an example. The Army provides $4,000 a year to service members specifically for college education. Up to $4,000. You can use it or you don't, but you don't get to roll it over to the next year. You don't get to cash it in. So if you don't use it, that's $4,000 of money that could have been used towards college tuition that just went wasted if you're not taking advantage of it. So the Army in each branch of the military has different funding levels. So not all of the branches provide $4,000 a year. Some of them are a little bit lower, and the amount changes every year for some of the branches depending upon the budget that each branch of the military gets to support education. So please, as Bethany said in her presentation, we can't stress this enough. All of the counselors at the education centers that can answer all of these questions and help you navigate through this are so happy to help each of the service members, because we don't want you leaving money on the table that you could be using to finance your education.
Rick, other questions?
I do have another question. Let me just spot it right here. Sorry. What is the likelihood of transfer of credits that would cover general education requirements for BS degrees?
So this is Kelly. So again, I will take this on. I would say the likelihood is very, very high. However, every single institution has its own right. They're the right to say, we will accept this credit or this class, or we won't. So the general education requirements, the writing, the math, the speech, the communications, the sciences, most of those are pretty common across most academic curriculums at universities and colleges, and all of that curriculum has been evaluated by the American Council on Education, which makes these recommendations that, if you take, I'll just say this as an example, if you take college algebra at institution A and you now are at institution B, which also requires college algebra, the chances of the classes transferring are very, very high. Credit will not transfer if you do not get a grade of C or above. And most regionally accredited and nationally accredited institutions abide by the American Council of Education regulations. So I feel comfortable in saying the likelihood of courses transferring are very, very high. However, caveat, you need to make sure that you have contacted an institution that you want to transfer credit to ensure that it is going to transfer.
This is Frank. Having worked in higher education for almost 27 years, I would strongly echo what Kelly just said. Rick, do we have any other questions out there?
Yes. Let me see here. Are there wide ranges in acceptance standards for military members?
So this is Kelly. I would say that the acceptance policy at all universities, the admissions requirements are the same across the board. Everybody has to have whatever the institution's acceptance requirements are, will most likely also apply to military members. So for example, if in order to be admitted into an academic institution requires, a high school diploma, they might require SAT or ACT exams. They might require a college essay. Typically, those requirements are going to be the same for any student applying to that university. They should not be easier for military students to be accepted into a university because there are academic standards that need to be fulfilled to get into universities and colleges, and universities and colleges have different acceptance requirements. What a lot of universities and colleges do, though, is provide some special assistance to service members. They might waive the application fee so that the financial burden of applying to colleges is a little bit easier. But most likely they're not going to give service members and their families an easier path into admission into a university that they would not be providing to their civilian students. if that makes sense.
Okay, I do have, if you're ready to move to possibly the last one here. Actually, it's a rephrase of the one we were talking about before the last, which is the likelihood of transferability. She had expressed more specifically the likelihood of transferability of specifically CCAF credits to cover general education requirements for BS degree.
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand completely the question, but let me give you a little bit of an overview of, sorry, Bethany, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I was just going to say, I think what she's asking, so I think you would find that there are numerous schools that have actual special partnerships, I guess, with CCAF that do help with that transferability, and that's definitely something to research. I'm trying to remember, Kelly, I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head how many schools there are, but there are numerous schools that have this agreement with CCAF for that specific, for that reason that she's asking.
So
sure. So I would say there's probably over 500 schools that have a partnership with the Community College of the Air Force that provide the general education requirements or opportunities for service members or airmen to take those general education requirements at one of these institutions that apply to the CCAF degree. And all of these schools that are partners with CCAF have been vetted and are part of the CCAF program. And with those partner institutions, the academic institutions, airmen do not have to take all of the general education requirements from the same institution. They could take a math course from one of the partner institutions. They could take a writing course from a different one, the science course, or whatever the gen ed requirements are. They can be taken from, multiple different institutions or all at the same institution. And like we said, there are, I just saw the list the other day. I want to say it's well over 500 academic colleges and universities.
And then those will feed into bachelor's programs, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, I think was what she was asking for as well. And it will lead into numerous degree programs at the bachelor's level.
So this is Frank, and I will speak to kind of a separate way for the Community College Air Force. The airmen and airmen will get a lot of training depending on their MOS, and sometimes within the MOS, the credits that they earn based on their MOS and their occupational training, the institutions can look and say what credits might they accept from that. Like, for example, my son did not finish an associate's degree at the Community College of the Air Force. He finished his schoolwork, his degree after he got out. But to the point, though, he did get credits for some of the elements of the work that he did for his occupational classification and the credits that were earned for that at CCAF.
And Frank, thank you. This is Kelly. Just let me follow up a little bit on that. So the Community College of the Air Force, or CCAF, is granting associates in applied science degrees. With those recognized degrees, 45 of the 60 credit hours that are required for those associate and applied science degrees, 45 of the credit hours come from the service members' occupational specialty, the military experience. The remaining 15 credit hours come from the academic institutions who are partnered with CCAF to provide the general education instruction. And those are the writing courses, the math courses, the communications courses, the academic courses that airmen will not get credit for from their military experience.
Okay, that concludes our questions side of things. Do we have anything else, Frank?
No, I mean, I will open it up if there are any closing comments from our presenters. Otherwise, I will, make a few closing comments.
Okay. Bethany, Kelly?
Kelly, do you have
Did you want to say anything? Well, no, I would just like to say, oh, sorry, Bethany.
No, go ahead.
I would
Go
just
ahead,
like
Kelly.
to say, sure. I would just like to say that I am a military spouse. My husband is getting ready to retire from the military after a 30-year career, and I have been by his side as he has had to navigate through all of the stuff that I'm sure all of the questions you all have had. He's had to navigate through his military career, and he is leaving the military with 2 master's degrees, so graduate degrees that he earned through the university at 2 very wonderful and respectable and reputable universities. And he was able to finance the whole thing, or both of those degrees, using tuition assistance. And, all of the questions, the scariness, the, fear of asking for help. I've watched him go through all of this, but the people at the education centers on all of these military installations, they are here to help, and they want to help you, and the schools are here to help you. And we just want to so much make sure that you understand what a huge benefit the tuition assistance program is for you while you're on active duty. And then you can use your GI Bill when you leave active duty. And my husband is now retiring in about a month, and he is now going to use his GI Bill benefits to go get possibly a PhD. So the benefits that are there for you are just incredible. It is complicated and it is scary, but there are people there across the world at military installations that are there to help you all.
This is Bethany. That's the main thing I think I can stress. Working with military education now for well over 15 years in different roles, there are so many resources available to you in those education centers. I think one of the biggest reasons, or the biggest things that'll help you be successful, is to build a relationship with them no matter where you are. Ask questions, see what's available, and just keep that line of communication open with your schools and the education counselors, and it will help you along the way to take advantage of these benefits that are there for you. So,
I want to say thank you. This is Frank. Speak to Kelly and to Bethany for their support. And I would like to thank Rick for, helping. I would also thank all those out there for your time and participation. We at Community Salutes are in the infancy stages of starting to, build this type of interaction and service for our newest members, whether they're yet to take their oath of enlistment, and whether that's soon to come or shortly thereafter, and be a support to those and the families that also support our men and women, particularly our newest men and women in uniform. So again, thank you all for your time and participation. This information, I'll let Rick speak to it, when it'll be available out on our the Community Salutes Connect website. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Okay, sure thing. So that wraps up the webinar for now. And